Good evening. My name is Matt Wallace, and back in February of this year, I started a consultancy called Mockingbird Consulting. I've been mucking around with computers for pretty much as long as I can remember, and I also decided not to go to university. That's not quite true. I didn't make it through university. And as a result, I've been playing this game for the better part of 17 years now. I've seen a few things, and about 8 years ago, I got into this thing called DevOps that made sense at the time. And these days, I'm not so sure whether it still makes sense or not. So this is why I'm giving this talk. Previously to going self-employed, I was working for Steve and James at DevOps Guys down in Cardiff. And prior to that, I've worked at Hewlett-Packard and all sorts of other places. And yeah, it's been an interesting way of getting here. So anyway. People often claim no one knows what DevOps means. We do, but before we get there, a vaguely wise man once said this: if you get 10 DevOps experts in a room, you'll get 11 different opinions on what DevOps actually means. I'd go further and say you'll probably get nearly 15 to 20. But, you know, James Betley, many of you all know, said this sometime around 2016-ish, and I'm fairly certain we'd had a few drinks at the time as well. So before we get there, what is DevOps? Well, first of all, we had the developers, and they had these really cool ways of working, and they had all these really, really shiny tools, and they were desperate to deploy it as fast as they possibly could to every environment going, demanding root access everywhere they trod. We also had the ops team. Ops team knew how to be stable. We knew how to scale things, we knew how to deploy securely, and whilst the developers had the best hipster beards going, we knew how to rock the sandals. So we threw them together, and we dropped the best bits of both. We shipped code faster without testing it. No ops was used as an excuse to just throw stuff at the cloud and hope that it worked. And this wonderful phrase of disagree and commit became a byword for just get it done. I don't care what you think. But there's more. Because amongst all of this, a guy called Patrick had an idea. And it made sense. What if we all worked together instead of fighting each other and throwing things over the wall? So we started talking to each other and exchanging ideas and focusing on communication, because the tooling was pretty much irrelevant as long as we got stuff deployed. And we got StatsD out of that, and CF Engine was kicking around, and then Puppet and Chef and Ansible and SaltStack and all of these other tools that I'm sure most of us in this room use on a day-to-day basis. And we knew where this was going, and it was great. And it was fantastic to be part of this movement for 5 or 6 years. And then someone started switching the signposts. And all of a sudden, DevOps became about tooling. I'd be interested to know, as I go through these, how many of them you've heard, and indeed how many you've actually said. We've installed Jenkins and Ansible. It's all right, we're doing DevOps. We've put our Java monolith into a container. It's in the cloud. We're doing DevOps. But you're not. It's about getting people working together to provide joint expertise in order to reach a common goal. It's a tried and tested way of working that's been adopted for years in other industries. I said at the beginning I didn't quite make it through university. There's been 5 times I've not quite made it through university. I keep finding the student union. So I tried the Open University because they don't have a student union and still didn't complete that course. However, one of the things I did do was I spent some time working with the NHS. And the NHS have got this nailed. If you go in to have an operation, you don't expect the receptionist to administer the anaesthetic. You don't expect the nurse to carry out the operation, and you certainly wouldn't expect the surgeon to carry out the post-operative care. But I can tell you now that once a day, for their most critical patients, a group of nurses, surgeons, theatre staff, anaesthetists occupational health, physiotherapy. All of these people are meeting on a regular basis with all of the information they need about the patient in front of them to make the best possible decisions about that patient's care. So why can't we get 3 developers and an ops guy around the table talking about a platform that, let's be honest, if it breaks, we might lose our jobs, but it's unlikely we're going to lose our lives. You know, our teams, our DevOps teams that we have, and that's a phrase that winds me up, and I'll come on to that in a minute. They should have, yes, operations, yes, developers, because otherwise it would just be ops and dev and not DevOps, right? But they should have QA, sales, marketing, why not? Someone from customer support that's the lead for that particular product. All of them sat around the same cluster of desks, if possible, or at the very least on a daily stand-up. And by stand-up, I do not mean a progress report or a status update. I've managed to do a 15-minute stand-up with 21 people in it. Okay? If your stand-ups are taking longer than 15 minutes, you're doing it wrong. No matter how big or small your team is. Why can't we adopt this model that the NHS has, of having all of these experts on one team focusing on one product? We can. And in fact, some of the most progressive, some of the most productive DevOps teams that I've worked with and helped coach over the last 5 years or so have been exactly that. Forget the generalists. Forget looking for unicorns. They don't exist. There are people out there who are very, very good at doing lots and lots of things, but there are also areas where they fall down. And the generalists, well, they know a huge amount of things about, or they know a small amount of things about a lot of things, rather. But when stuff breaks, especially if you're working inside somewhere like AWS, where you don't have access to the network, you can't just log onto a switch and see where that packet went. Then you need people that understand the cloud. You don't need some guy that once built OpenStack on a spare box in his garage. Yeah? If you don't communicate with each other, you're not doing DevOps. Okay? It's that simple. It's about communication. If you've got a DevOps team, you are not doing DevOps. But congratulations on creating another silo. I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of organizations about this. Going in where they're just starting this wonderful digital transformational journey, or whatever Gartner decides to call it next week. And all of them follow the same pattern. And the pattern is, we had this huge unwieldy thing over there, and we've seen the promised land. And someone said that if we install Ansible and start using Terraform in AWS, it doesn't matter what the processes and procedures are, we're doing DevOps, and therefore we'll get to the promised land. If you're not addressing the culture and the environment within your organization, you are not doing DevOps. And this is it. This is Patrick. This is the guy that came up with the phrase DevOps. He's the guy that ran and I believe still runs the first DevOps day and the ones that followed it. The cultural aspect of collaboration gives everyone an equal seat at the table. Both dev and ops are important. This means there's more mutual respect. This also creates more empathy for each other's problems, resulting in a nicer environment to work in. So who here would prefer a nicer environment to work in? Everyone, right? Who enjoys those meetings at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, where you get dragged in because yet again, something in AWS isn't quite working how we thought it would, and you're expected to work on late into the evening, where you could be at home spending time with your family or down the pub or whatever you do on a Friday night. You can't enjoy things like that. If you've got a team of experts and you're all coming together to solve the problems you've got, you will solve them faster. I'm not saying there's not going to be arguments, of course there is. If you get a bunch of experts in a room, they're going to argue. because they've all got very strong opinions, and that's how they became experts. But it will make your life so much easier. So what does it mean? Work together. Learn from each other. Lean on the experts in your team. If you're a developer and you've seen something that you think might be database related, spend a bit of your time chasing that down. But go and find a DBA, because I guarantee you they will find it faster than anyone else. If you're a systems administrator and you're seeing this weird stuff just being thrown into the logs, and it doesn't feel right, troubleshooting a gut hunch is nigh on impossible. But if you go and speak to the developer and say, look, I've got all of these lines of code heading into my logs, what does it mean? Can you sit down? Have you got half an hour to go through this with me so that I can understand what your application's doing? Out of a conversation that started with something's doing something weird to the system will come, as an ops guy, I understand what you're trying to do there. And actually, I think I can help. And I think I can help because at a previous job, I saw this happen and this happen and this happen. And that led to this. And now imagine if you've got ops and dev and security and QA and test. Yeah, how many of you here have got a dedicated QA department? Okay, so a few of you. How many of you get your QA department to sit down with your testers and help them with their test-driven development tests? About 3 out of the 15 hands that went up. Pardon? So there's a QA department and there's separate testers? Well, this is what I'm asking. Why, if you have a separate QA team, why are they not sat with your developers? Why are they not teaching your developers how to test? Because they've got the expertise, and the more your developers know about how to test properly, the better your code will be when it ships. And that gets you closer to automation, and that gets you closer to continuous integration, and that gets you closer to continuous deployment. And before you know it, you're pretending to be Amazon and genuinely believing that you actually need to deploy 11 times a second or whatever the hell that metric is. You don't, by the way. You know, unless you are Amazon or Facebook or Google or operating at that scale, if you get to 11 deploys a second or 11 deploys a minute, whatever it is, well done. But don't set that as your target because it's ridiculous. And you'll get really, really undermined that 6 months in, it's gone from taking 6 months to deploy to deploying on a daily basis, but you're still not deploying 11 times a second. You know, it's just demoralizing. You've gone from deploying once every 6 months to deploying once a day. That's a fantastic, fantastic result. And that's it.